In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can draw a cute cartoon narwhal from start to finish using the iPad and Procreate. Just like all my videos, it's in real time, so you can follow along every single step of the way. And if you do follow along, feel free to post your work online. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, post it there and tag me at BeeJayDeL for your chance to see your artwork possibly featured in one of my upcoming videos, just like the people that you see here that followed along with my last tutorial, the Christmas moose. But today it's all about the narwhal, so let's go ahead and jump into it. All right guys, let's go ahead and draw a cartoon narwhal. Starting out, I'm using a 4000 by 4000 300 DPI canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brush, I'm gonna use two different sets today. I'm gonna start out sketching with my sketch pencil pack here. The HB pencil is what I'm gonna be using to sketch today. And then I'm gonna switch over to my cartooning pack using the standard Anchor Streamline. Then, once we move into doing the outlines and colors, links for both of those are down in the description below. And then for my color palette, once again, I've got this pre-made. So if you wanna download the exact same colors that I'm using in today's tutorial, you can find that for free if you go to my website, BeeJayDeL.com. Underneath the YouTube reference materials page, you'll find a link to that. That's down in the description below as well. And then finally, on my Apple Pencil, I'm using the ProDraw grip. ProDraw is a company that I started last year that makes accessories for iPad artists like yourself. The ProDraw grip is our first product, works with both the Gen 1 and Gen 2 Apple Pencil, makes those long drawing sessions so much more comfortable, gives you better line control. You can learn more about this and where to buy it down in the description as well. So let's go ahead and get started. For my color, I'm gonna start out sketching here with this dark blue color. That's also the color we're gonna use for the line work too. Once again, using that HB pencil here. Got this set to about 22%, and let's go ahead and get started. So to begin with, I'm just gonna do a basic oval shape here at the top. That's gonna be the head and the upper portion there of the narwhal. And then down here, I'll draw another oval. This is gonna help us kind of see the overall shape here. So I'm gonna follow this oval here down and connect it to the oval here at the bottom, just like this. And then we're gonna do the same thing here on this backside, connecting that to the top. And then we'll continue these lines back up towards the tail. So as they go in towards the tail, they're gonna kind of narrow in towards each other here, just like that. And then we'll draw a couple of ovals here for the fins of the tail, the left oval here being smaller than the right oval, just for the kind of perspective we're going with. Now that we've got those shapes in, we can kind of fine tune the shapes of the tail. So we're gonna curve here at the bottom and kind of angle this up at the top. We'll do the same thing here on this side. Let's kind of move back in towards the tail, probably have a kind of overlap there, and then back in towards the body there. All right, now for the fin here, we can use this same oval here to kind of help us visualize this. So we're gonna pull in an angled line here and curved, coming down and then back up around the back side of that oval. And with the perspective that we've got going on, this is gonna be a 3/4 perspective. So if we do kind of a center line here to visualize things, you can see to the right of the center line, there's more canvas real estate being taken up by the portion of the design here to the right. So when we do the fin over here, let's do an oval here. You can see that this is gonna be smaller than this one here because of the perspective. So now that we've got that oval, we can kind of use that as our guide, bringing a curved line here up and then back in towards the body. You can kind of see how that works out. All right, next up, let's go ahead and do the eyes here. So I'm gonna start in with some ovals here to kind of get those in place, just doing it real light because I don't want to use this shape for the eyes. So now that I've got those in there, I can start to bring in kind of a more kind of pointed at the top oval here. Just like that. Bringing those back down and around. And I think too, with the overall expression here, we're going to give him a pretty goofy, wide mouth grin of some sort. So I'm going to pull in some curved lines here across those eyes to kind of give the effect of cheeks there. It's going to help with the overall expression. Now that we've got that, we can go ahead and get the pupils in here. Get the irises around there, just like that. Do upside down V here with another one on top for eyebrows here. Same thing on this side, just like that. And then another upside down V here for the horn. Have that coming in towards the center there, curving around where that meets the head. All right, next up, let's go ahead and get the smile in here. So I'm gonna pull this way back here. This is gonna be really big and really goofy. Just one thing I love about cartooning is just getting some really exaggerated stuff like this going on. Bring in the bottom of the mouth here, and then bring in, let's do an oval here to kind of map out where the tongue's gonna go. Then we can break this kind of in half to get the tongue laid in there. Bring a curved line here towards the front, and then the inside of the mouth here. Kind of fill that in, just like that. There we go. And then finally, let's go ahead and kind of bring in a belly here. We'll do the belly having a different color. So if we bring this around like that, we can have the belly be a different color there. From here, I'm just going to go back in and kind of darken up some of these lines coming around. We are going to drop the opacity of this in the next section. So we want to make sure that we've got everything pretty well laid out and visible here once we drop the opacity. All right, and I think that looks pretty good. So there's our narwhal sketch. From here then, we're ready to move in and start adding the inks. So to begin the outlines and the inks, let's go ahead and come up to our layers menu. I'm gonna make a new layer on top of layer 1. This is gonna be our inks layer. And then I'm gonna go ahead and grab the N for blend mode on layer 1 and drop the opacity like we talked about. Bring that down to in between 30 and 35%. I think that's still visible there on the screen. So we don't want it to take away from what we're doing here on layer 2. We're gonna keep the same color here, but now I'm gonna switch my brush. So coming back up to my brush library, coming back to my cartooning set, and that standard inker streamline is what we're gonna use here. See this, I've got set at 8% as my size. That's kind of my go-to size on a 4,000 pixel canvas. If you wanna set this in, you can see that line here. As you move your cursor here for the size, you'll see the plus button right here. That's gonna add in that default right there. So this is really handy when you're jumping back and forth between different brush sizes and you don't want to forget what you used in one section. You can always set that. There's a total of 4 different ones that you can use. So we've got that decided. Now let's decide where our light source is coming in from. This is going to help us with line weights. Anything closer to the light source is going to have a thinner line. Anything further away from the light source is going to have a thicker line where the shadows are. Highlights, thinner line where those are. So on this, I think we'll have the light source coming in from this top left-hand corner. So highlights around here, shadows, kind of this area back here. So now that we've got that decided, we can go ahead and start. Let's go ahead and pull in just a little bit closer here. And I think I'm gonna start back here and just make a big swooping line here for the overall shape. We'll get that knocked in first. So a little bit heavy here. I'm gonna start up higher too, so I have control over the thickness of this as I begin. So we'll bring this around and and get thicker there as we come back down and around. Now you'll see I missed this a little bit here on the top. If I wanted to redraw it, I could, or you can also grab the arrow here, and with warp, I can kind of pull this back in a little bit to get that to match up a little bit better. As you're doing this, you want to make sure though that interpolation here is set to bicubic. If you move stuff around with nearest neighbor or bilinear, it's going to be a little bit blurry once you lock it in. So making sure that setting is selected will avoid that from happening. So I'm going to grab the brush now, use my eraser. If I hold down the eraser, it's going to set the eraser to the exact same brush that I'm using to draw with. Then I can come in here and kind of remove some of this to get ready for this next step here. So I want a little bit of overlap there where it meets up. So we'll draw in just kind of a tapered line here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better. To do tapers, start with a light press here and get harder and heavier with your stroke as you bring it up. And that'll give you a taper like that. Now, if you do purchase the brushes that I'm using today, all of the settings that I am using are the exact same as the brushes that you get. If you're not seeing the exact same outcomes, you just really have to practice at it. It is something that's kind of trial and error, and you got to get comfortable of being able to feel when you're supposed to apply pressure, when you're supposed to let up pressure. So it does take some work. The pressure settings I have that I use in Procreate are just the defaults, so there's nothing to change there. Like I said, it's more just trial and error. All right, next up, I want to do this fin right here, and I think my button on my shirt is moving the screen here, so I do apologize for that. So for this, I don't want to have to erase this line and then have to try to match up this fin. So an easier thing to do, I'm going to make a new layer on top of my layer 2. And using my brush here, I'm going to go ahead and bring this around. You'll see I overlapped here. Usually I would have to go in and try to erase that, but since I'm on a separate layer, I can now go to my layers, I can select that layer 2, and I can erase this without hitting that fin line that I just made. So it makes it so much easier to go back in and kind of fine tune your lines, and you don't have to worry about making sure that those meet up. Now that we're done with that, then what we can do is you can go ahead and pinch those to combine them, and they're all back on the same one. Now I'm going to continue then with the inking process here, kind of pulling these lines up. Once again, this is going to be thinner at the top and get kind of thicker there as we come around to the bottom. One more time so you can see. You can see it's just a lighter press there and a thicker press towards the bottom. Continue moving around here. We'll do the mouth next. We'll bring this line up. Just like that. Thinner line here at the bottom. Once we're inside of the design itself, I like to use thinner lines inside compared to the outlines on the outside. Bring this around. You'll see I'm going to move some of these lines. Like this one, I moved it over. I didn't want it touching here. I still want that gap right there in between those. So you can go back in during this stage and kind of fine tune some of those problems with your sketch. That's why I don't take a lot of time during the sketch process, because I know I'm going to come back in and really fine tune everything. Starting out with a thicker line and tapering this down into a thinner line. If you don't get the sharpness of taper you want, you can always come back here too to your eraser and just kind of erase the end of a line there so you get a taper that you're happy with there. Now for the eyes here, I like to start out with a thinner line at the bottom, get thicker around the top and thinner at the back. The heaviness comes here at the top. So for this, to also start out with the right line size that you want, I'm gonna do another new layer here so I can start down here with my line so I get the right thickness coming up. Starting before the actual stroke begins will really help you kind of get used to where your pressure is at, and you'll get a much better result that you're aiming for if you start outside and below where you want to be at. Now that we've got that done, we can use that eraser again. And you see, just coming back in here, as long as I'm careful, I can erase those areas and I don't have to worry about hitting those lines that I just did for the cheeks. Once again here, then we can pinch those together. We're back to one layer now on our outlines. And we'll just kind of continue this process around, doing the pupils here. Once again, with this perspective, the one on the right here is going to be larger than the one on the left. Irises here are going to have a thinner line around these. Didn't stop soon enough there. I went over top of the line there. So a thinner line around these. And then here, instead of erasing the highlights here, to save us a step, I'm just going to hold down on my background here, so I select white. And then I'm just going to fill these in with white here, a couple of dots for the highlights in the eyes. Usually I go in with an eraser, but if you do that, you've got to go back in and color those in on the color flats process. So that just saves us an extra step later on. Then holding down again till I get back to that line color, and we're back to that original outline color. Next up, we'll do the eyebrows here. A little bit thinner line on the top, gets thicker at the bottom. And then once again, if you want to kind of fine tune that taper, use the eraser to get that point that you're looking for. Same thing here, a little bit heavier at the back and bottom, and then lighter there at the top. Now the overlap here of the horn, kind of same thing that we talked about before. We're going to want to remove that line, so we're going to make a new layer to draw the horn on. And we can bring our lines down for this. A little bit thicker there in the back. And bring a tapered line down there where it meets. Coming back up to our layers then, layer 2 selected. With our eraser, we can erase that overlap, and you see it makes it super easy. Let's go ahead and add in some curves here to the horn. Really thin lines for that. Pulling back out so you can kind of see where we're at. And I think here, this is kind of where I add in some details. I'm going to zoom in pretty tight here so you can see. I'm just going to add in some ovals here, like some little freckles or little textured areas here that'll be a different color, just to make the design a little bit more exciting. It's not as bland and just has some fun little stuff going on with it. Pulling back out then so you can see where we're at. And then last but not least, I've got this line here at the bottom. Once again with that, it's going to be a line that's going to overlap. So I never combined the horn layer here, so we can actually use that same layer to do this line. And I'm just going to bring this up and around and back down into the tail like that. With that eraser then, you can see how easy this is. If I was trying to do this on the same layer and trying to get those lines to match up and not erase that line, it's super difficult. It takes a ton of time. So this, more than anything else, is just a really big time saver. All right, so there is the inks. Let's go ahead and combine those layers by pinching. I'm going to turn off our sketch layer, and this is what we're left with then. There is our finished ink design. So from here, we're ready to go ahead and start adding the color flats. So before we add the color flats, I'm going to go ahead and move this guy around just a little bit, not crazy on his positioning. So if I grab the arrow here and I use freeform, I'm just going to bring him more into the center there so he looks a little bit better. Now that we've got him positioned where we want him, I'm going to go ahead and tap layer 2, and we're going to set this as reference. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to make another new layer here, which we can do now, underneath layer 2, and it's going to allow us to drag colors into here using layer 2 reference as a guide to where they go. Since they're on a separate layer, it makes it non-destructive, and it's going to make adding the highlights and shadows a ton more easier. So let's go ahead with that selected then. We're going to switch our colors. We've got this yellow here for the horn, so we're going to drag and drop. Then I'm going to hit continue filling here, and we'll just tap those areas to fill them in super quick. Lock that in and go up here to my next color, this darker blue. That's going to be the base color. Locking that in again. Lighter blue here for the body, belly part. I'm going to zoom in so we can see a little bit better here. We want to make sure that we don't hit the lines. So zooming in is really beneficial for these small areas like this to really get in tight so you can fill these in without hitting those outlines. So we've got those filled in. Next up, we've got the reddish color here. The first one's going to be for the mouth there. The next one, the darker one's going to be for the inside part there. We've got pink next for the tongue. Next up, we've got white for the eyes, which they look like they're filled in, but they're not. Just we have the background here is white, so it looks like they're filled in. Then finally, we've got this green for the eyes. So we'll drag and drop that into there. And then pulling back out, you can see what we're left with. Super fast, super easy. Adding color flats is one of the quickest parts of any design, using the process that I use with the reference and the second layer like that. So with those done then, we're ready to move on to adding shadows and highlights. So let's go ahead and work on shadows first. To do this, let's go back up to our layers menu. We're gonna make a new layer on top of our color flats. Then we're gonna tap this one and we're gonna set this to clipping mask. So this is going to allow us to color in on layer 4, and it's only gonna show up on the areas that are colored in on layer 3. So if we color out here in the white, it's not gonna show up. With that done now, back to our color palette. We've got this purple color here for our shadows. So let's go ahead and select that. And let's begin. Once again, light source coming in from this way. So we'll have some shadows here coming down and around on the bottom part of the belly. Get this filled in. Let's go ahead and let's turn off reference on layer 2. This is going to allow us to get some bigger areas filled in, and then we can drag and drop the color. So back to our layer 4, where our shadows at. Once I've got those connected, I can drag and drop that. I'm going to kind of zoom in here better so you can see at this back part too. I want a shadow to come down here, but I want it to kind of follow the lines that we've already laid out in the sketch or the ink process. So you'll see as I do that, it kind of meets and tapers into that back line back there. I can drag and drop this in now that we've got it filled in. And then using the eraser, obviously I don't want that shadow coming across like that to the fin, so we can erase that there. Continuing back here, we'll add in some shadow here along the back. Once again, kind of following the overall shape that we laid in with the inks process. Having that taper back in and having a bit of a shadow there as well. All right. Have a shadow here coming underneath this fin. So again, you can kind of see how that curves with that line that we've already got there. Then we'll just kind of make our way up here. A little bit of a shadow there. We'll get here underneath the mouth. Kind of bring in this shadow here as it comes up. Letting that curve back and then getting that part there. The tongue here. And a little bit of shadow there, and then also inside the mouth here we can get some shadow. Now of course this is super purple right now. It's not going to look that way here shortly. We're going to adjust the opacity and it's going to look a lot better. So if you're looking at it now thinking that looks off, that's the way it's supposed to look right now. I just like to get a lot of areas filled in before I start to adjust the opacity, because I want to make sure that it looks good on all different colors. Since we're using this as a kind of one-stop shop for the shadow color, we got to make sure that when we adjust the opacity that it shows up like it's supposed to on all the different colors that we're using this on. Now, if you want to kind of dive deeper into this and kind of the color theory behind it. If you want to use different shadow colors, you can as well. To keep these videos kind of fast, I just use one single shadow color in most cases, just to kind of speed everything up so we're not jumping back and forth between a lot of different shadow colors. Get the back side of this eye coming around here, and same thing here, just a little bit here, not too much. All right, now let's go ahead and adjust that. So back up here to our layers menu, N for blend mode, and we're gonna drag and drop this color down here. I think probably 25 to 30% looks pretty good wherever you're at there. If you want to make a decision based on what you're seeing on your screen, but I think that looks pretty good, so we'll use that as the percentage. From here, I'm going to switch back to my color palette, and I'm going to choose this blue here. We're going to use this on the eyes, the whites of the eyes. Whoops. So with this selected, I'm just going to bring in this. I didn't want to use that same purple because that purple is going to look quite a bit different on the white. So this is where I'm talking about using multiple colors. With doing it in my videos like this, just one small section doesn't take up a lot of different time, but on my own personal work, sometimes I'll use maybe 3-4 different colors for the shadows, just depending on the effect that I'm going for. All right, pulling back out now so you can see that is what the shadows look like that we have done. So from here then, we're ready to go ahead and move on to doing the highlights. So for highlights, same kind of general process to set everything up. Coming to our layers menu, I'm going to make a new layer here. We're going to set this one as clipping mask as well. And then I'm going to change my color over to this kind of bright green here. And we'll zoom in so we can see a little bit better. I'm going to continue kind of how this shadow ends right here. It's going to taper back out and into the highlight here. So we'll bring that around the top here. Once again, this is super bright. We're going to drop this down here shortly. Bring in highlight there. I'm going to pull this out of the eyebrow. All right, continue this up and around here to the mouth. Pull in another one here, kind of a tapered curved line there. And I'm going to bring this one just down a little bit further. I don't want it to come all the way up to that line, because I want to have that line kind of jut back out like that. Just to kind of taper in right there. This is also why doing shadows and highlights on 2 separate layers is nice, because as I erase this, if I was doing it all in the same, I would have erased that shadow that we already had right there. So that's one of the benefits too of using multiple layers. And then some highlights on the tongue there. Also add in some here on the cheeks. Again, kind of tapering that into the line that we have done. Pulling some here on top of this fin and around that curve there. Just like that. Continue down to this fin here. And that kind of overlap there as well. Then once again, back to the eraser. If it's too thick, if you don't like the way it meets up with the line, you can just fine tune it just like this. All right, and then I think I'm gonna do a couple of kind of oval highlights there. All right, now this one we're gonna do a little bit different of a technique. We're gonna come up to the adjustments layer here, and we're gonna use bloom for this. Holding our pencil down on the screen, then we're gonna slide this to the right, and you'll see we get this nice glow color. It's a little bit bright though, so once again, back to our layers menu, and I'm gonna grab N for blend mode and drag down the opacity here to maybe about 60 to 65%, I think looks pretty good. All right, and there we go. So there's our design for our narwhal. We've got the sketch, the inks, color flats, highlights, and shadows. So finally, let's go ahead and add a background to this guy. So to begin our background, I'm gonna come up here to the layers menu, very bottom layer. We're gonna tap that one and make a new layer. I'm gonna go up to my color palette. Bottom row here, the first one, this light blue, we'll drag and drop that in. And then I'm gonna make another new layer by coming up to my layers menu. Dark blue here, we'll drag and drop that one in. And then we're gonna get our arrow here. With freeform selected, we'll just drag this down a little bit below halfway there. We'll hit the layers menu to lock it in, and then I'm gonna pinch those layers together. So this is our background right now. From here, we're gonna go back to our adjustments menu, and we're gonna use Gaussian blur here. So if we select that, just like we did with the bloom, if we hold down our pencil and slide to the right, you'll see we get this kind of nice fade here in the background. So it's not just one solid color. Okay, now that we've got that, let's go ahead, coming back up to our layers menu. Let's make a new layer on top of the background we just did. Let's go ahead and go up to our color palette and choose white. And we're just gonna add in kind of some waves here in the background. Just kind of some shapes, just like this. Just kind of following along, making the bottom go the same way that the top did. We'll drag and drop our color in there. And I'm gonna go ahead and make another new layer here. And I'm gonna alternate these. So we'll drag these colors in here. Connecting these end parts so then we can drag and drop our color in. Then I'm gonna go back to the bottom one here, which is this one. Just do some more lines like this. So again, connecting everything here and dragging and dropping in. And then back to the other one here. Do that one more time here. And then connecting everything here and dragging and dropping, maybe. If I've got it all connected, we can drag and drop. There we go. All right. Now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and go back up to the layers menu. We're gonna grab N for blend mode here. We'll drag this down to, let's go about 20% with this one, 25. And then back to layer 7. We'll drop this one down to maybe about 38. So we've got them as two different ones now, so they're not the exact same. So they look a little bit different. And from here, if you want to fine tune and use the eraser, then you can go back in, and if you don't like the shape of some of these, you can kind of fix that from there. Of course, you want to make sure that you're on the right layer. And then getting the brush again, we can go ahead and maybe add in some bubbles here. So I'm going to make the brush as big as possible. And by pressing down different pressures, I can get different size bubbles here. Once I've got a few of these laid in, then I'm going to go ahead and switch back to that other layer with the different opacity there. Get some of these thrown in as well. Just like that. Okay. And then finally, the last thing I need to do then is I'm going to make a new layer with my inks color here. I'm just gonna go ahead and sign this guy and we will all be done. 23, first video of 23. All right. And there you go. How to draw a cartoon narwhal, the first video on my channel for 2023. Welcome back, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. If you liked today's video, if you found it helpful, do me a favor, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos. Also, like I said at the top of the video, if you guys follow along with any of these tutorials, do a design based off of them, feel free to share your work online. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, definitely post it there and tag me at BeeJayDeL for your chance to possibly see your artwork featured in one of my upcoming videos. For me, I can also be found online as well, BeeJayDeL.com. So that's it for today's video. Once again, appreciate you guys watching, and until next time, keep creating.